We're going back to the source. We've had an opportunity over the last few weeks to catch up with Nicole Dunn and talk about aged care and the challenges that have been faced in that sector by the whole COVID contagion experience. Nicole, welcome back to The Informer. I want to talk about home care because that's one of your specialty areas and it's been very much in the news. It was part of the Royal Commission hearing we heard, of course, in Sydney. And we know that more and more older Australians do want to stay at home, especially when they hear about the COVID-19 outbreaks in residential care facilities around the country. And that's what they think. I know my mother, for example, doesn't want to leave home in any way, shape or form. As far as she's concerned, no, it's her home and she's staying there. And so far, so good. But we've got members of the family constantly checking in on her because she lives in New South Wales. That's not always the case, of course, in Victoria, where things are very, very different. Where do we start? How can you explain what a home care package is to someone who hasn't run their head across it or possibly thought they were in need of it?
Yeah, so essentially, George, a home care package is an allocation of government funding towards an older person, and then that funding is used to purchase home care services, whether it be they need a nurse, a physio, some help with meal delivery, showering. And the importance is that the funding can range anywhere from $8,000 right through to about $51,000. So it can be quite a significant amount of funding an individual might be entitled to. And it's one of the main ways that the government helps to support older people who want to stay in their own home. So it's certainly very important for older people to know about.
So we're talking about federal government understanding this or state governments understanding this?
It's important for the government, but it's also important for consumers to understand what a home care package is. So I meet quite a few clients who are looking at arranging home care, and it's sort of a bit too late down the track in terms of where waiting times are at in terms of accessing a home care package.
So how long does it take from the moment you start thinking to the time it actually can be applied? What sort of numbers are we seeing or have you seen from experience? Is it a matter of months? Can it be a year or so? Or it can be a matter of weeks?
No, it's definitely months to years. So at the moment, what we know is that there's over 100,000 older Australians waiting for a home care package. And what that translates to in waiting periods is anywhere from 6 months right through to 18 months from the point at which they're approved for a package. And obviously it can take some time for an older person and their family to give some thought about understanding home care packages. Is it something they want to be assessed and applied for? So it's actually taking far too long, and it certainly has been quite a focus of the Aged Care Royal Commission.
Now, I remember from our experience, we had to get carpenters in and make a couple of adjustments to assist my mother to get around the house. There's a lot of that involved as well. You've got to, in order to get the older person safe and secure, climbing staircases, they might need another handrail and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. And then they are certainly, services that need to be arranged, whether it be through a home care package or other means, and they can take time to get that professional out into the home and then also to get the assessment done and equipment installed. So it's not generally a quick process.
Now, the provider, is it a state-based service or is it a federal government service?
Yeah, so generally it's all through the federal government. Providers themselves can be private companies, they can be health services, they can be not-for-profit organisations. And really the role of a provider is to be the middleman between the government funding and then the home care services themselves. So they have a really important role in terms of administering the funds and making sure the funds are used appropriately. They also have a clinical role in that there may be a case manager, and most often there is a case manager involved, and that person really helps the older person to arrange the care that they need. They assess that person to make sure they're getting the care that they need, and they help the older person and their family to really navigate the system. So regardless of what type of package someone is on, there will always be a provider involved. And so it's really important to choose a provider that best matches what a client is going to need.
That leads me to the next question. How do you pick the one that's most appropriate to you?
Yeah, well, it's really quite the challenge. And the reason it is quite the challenge is because in Melbourne, there's over 100 providers out there that someone can choose from. So that is the question. How do you choose when there are so many providers out there? And particularly when the fees can be different from one provider to the other, and where providers can certainly have different expertise areas in aged care, or some might work with particular cultural groups. So, it's certainly a challenge, and it can really come down to, well, what types of questions do you ask of those providers?
I was going to say, is there maybe a possibility that the federal government itself, can do a better job at making these home care packages more accessible?
Yeah, so there's certainly the way to make them more accessible is certainly to provide more funding. So funding has been delivered, but with the long waiting list, there's clearly more that needs to be done. There's certainly a role for governments in terms of the governance of home care packages. The fees are not consistently reported from one provider to another. They can all report quite differently. And just where, we have with banks, at one point it was really difficult to know, if you take out a bank loan, well, how do I know what fees does that bank charge compared to that bank? And comparison rates were introduced. And I certainly think introducing a comparison rate style of reporting fees would make it much easier for older people and their families to, more accurately compare one provider to another.
Look, I think home care packages are a terrific way of taking the load off the system, which has been under pressure, especially if you hear some of the people who've been most affected by the latest challenges. So if there is a comparative test, or maybe one that the government can introduce, that would be terrific, to give people, as you say, a chance to identify the top 5, top 10 performing ones, and maybe look to them to be the provider of their choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, certainly introducing, user feedback that can be made publicly available is also another way to achieve that as well.
Nicole Dunn, if someone wants to know a bit more and they'd love to contact you, how do they go about it?
Easiest way is to look at my website, which is empoweragedcare.com.au, and all the information, including contact details, is there.
Nicole Dunn, thank you for joining us on The Informer.
Thank you.